Flying a drone is a pretty fun way to get a shot, but you don't want to crash it and you don't want to get mediocre footage. So here are some tips that might be helpful for anyone thinking about flying. This is the DJI Phantom 4, and just to be clear, gearbest.com did send me this drone for this video, but they haven't paid me or told me what to say. So we'll start with some practical tips, including the camera settings I like to use, and then we'll get into the creative side of actually trying to get good shots. So after 2 short test flights that gave me about 6 minutes of flying experience, I thought it was a good idea to fly out over a lake. It's all going well, I'm surprised by how easy it is to fly, and then I look back to land and realise that's quite a small gap to get through. The battery's getting low, so I need to land as soon as possible, preferably without crashing into the trees and splashing into the water.
Okay, backwards. Okay.
To cut a long story short, I did make it back.
That was quite scary.
But I learned something from that, which is tip number 1. It's much easier to fly drones in open spaces. For example, this location was perfect since I could pretty much fly anywhere without hitting trees or power lines. That's how I was able to get this shot. Tip number 2 is that lighting is one of the biggest factors for how good our footage looks. For example, at this angle, we can see everything, but if we try and film towards the sun, the camera can't handle that much contrast and it loses detail. You can pretty much spin around until you find the angle that looks best, or just wait until the sun is low in the sky if you want that kind of magical look. The general idea is that the better it looks to your eyes, the better it'll look on camera. Tip number 3, the battery only lasts for 20 minutes of flight time, so I think it's much better to plan out the shot first, go for a take, and then land straight after, rather than wasting lots of time hovering or flying back to the start point. Typically that gives us a lot more footage that we can actually use than if we were just doing one long flight. Now the battery will run out well before a 16 gig SD card fills up, so we may as well record before takeoff and only stop once we've landed. That way we capture the entire flight, because sometimes the best shots happen accidentally. And hey, if you do crash, at least you got it on camera. For tip number 4, let's briefly look at the rules of drone filming. The short answer is that if we're making money from the footage, it counts as commercial use. And in most countries, you need a license for that. But if we're not making any money from the project, like this video I won't make a penny because I've turned off the ads, then you can pretty much fly so long as you don't go near airports and stuff. But every country is different, so definitely search on the internet to find out more. For tip number 5, let's get into the recording settings that I use, and then we can start with the interesting stuff. So one evening I went through and tested all the different settings, and what's on the screen now is what I personally think looks the best on those Phantom cameras. Feel free to pause it if you're interested in that stuff. So we found a safe and legal place to film, we've set up the camera, and now we can think about getting some good shots. The typical drone shot is to fly up high and then get a moving landscape type shot, something like this. Now that shot's fine, but tip number 6 is to try a variety of different shots. We can get some ideas from films. There's the bird's eye view shot, which is often used for characters who are lying down. Here are a couple that we filmed. I quite like this look, it's especially suited for sports stuff, I think. We can also do the classic tracking shot, which drones aren't perfect for, but it can be done after some practice to get the framing right. And then of course there's the crane shot as the car drives away that we see in so many movies. But what good are all of these cool shots if they don't actually make sense for our project? Well, tip number 7 is probably the simplest creative reason to use a drone, and that's for extra energy. Like if we were filming a sports commercial and we wanted the audience to experience that speed, we could use some shots like these. But most of the time, we're not just looking for the most dynamic option. So imagine we've got a film where a character gets stranded out in the countryside. We could use the drone to get a really wide shot from up high to show just how small they are and how much further they've got to walk. But after that we have a choice. Should we fly towards them as well, since that's a more visually interesting shot? I personally think that might over-glamorize the moment. For someone who's walking alone in the wilderness, I'd just have the camera hover, so we can push the emotion towards stillness and tiredness rather than excitement and energy. That's tip number 8. The camera doesn't have to be moving all the time. Now, because drones are so much fun to fly and the shots do look pretty cool, you can imagine how easy it is to start throwing random shots in every scene simply because we can. And that's the danger, that they could get in the way of our story rather than supporting it. So once again, let's look to the movies for some ideas. If the wider location is important to the scene, then getting up high could be the best way to introduce our setting, for the simple reason that we can see more if we go up high. Or we could use a drone so we can fly alongside something else, allowing the audience to fly with the characters rather than just watching from the ground. It follows one of the basic principles of moving the camera, which is just to follow the action. Really, it's just about finding a way to link the camera work into the story. For example, this helicopter shot from Shawshank is the sort of thing that a skilled drone operator could pull off. So let's break this down a bit. First of all, it introduces us to the prison, showing the scale of it and its fortress-like qualities that do come into play later on. But that's not all. We can also see the inmates heading towards the entrance, which builds up some expectation to the next shots, which are essentially showing the greetings that the new inmates are getting. Now, would this film still be loved by so many people if this shot was taken out? I'd take a guess and say that it probably would, whether it had the aerial shot or not. For me personally, it's the message about persistence and the commentary on prisons and corruption that makes this film special, not the aerial photography. A drone is a very specific tool that can allow us to improve our films if we use it at the right time and in the right way. So let's try not to make the mistake of thinking that any piece of technology is really going to make or break our films. My name's Simon Cade, this has been DSLR Guide, and I'll see you next week.